Hello, dear viewers. Today we're diving into a dramatic and unexpected story. The bank manager mocked a black girl's check, but just 5 minutes later, he was fired on the spot by the CEO. This is not only a story about arrogance and prejudice, but also a powerful lesson to never judge someone by their appearance. Throughout this journey, you'll witness every tense moment, from the cruel mockery and public humiliation to the shocking twist that left the entire bank stunned. This story will make you feel angry, curious, and finally deeply satisfied when the truth comes out. If you love dramatic, inspiring, and unpredictable stories like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss a single episode. Now let's begin. That morning, the city sky was gray and dusty, the sidewalks packed with people rushing as if they were in a race against time. Among the crowd was a young woman named Maya. She wore a plain white shirt with a few wrinkles, simple jeans, and worn-out sneakers. She looked ordinary, perhaps even less noticeable than most. In her hand was a folded check, and if anyone cared to look closely, the number written on it was enough to make anyone at the bank stop in their tracks. Maya walked into the bank's grand lobby. The air was cold, filled with the mix of expensive cologne and the smell of freshly mopped floors, giving her the impression that this was a place reserved for the so-called elite. The bank manager, Mr. Richard, spotted her immediately and smirked. He was tall, with slicked-back hair and a bright red tie that practically screamed, "I'm more important than you." Maya approached the counter, offered a polite smile, and handed him the check. Her voice was calm. "I'd like to deposit this check into my account." Richard glanced down, his eyes pausing on the enormous figure printed on the paper. Then he looked Maya up and down, smirked, and let out a mocking laugh. "This check? Ha! Are you sure it's even real?" A few customers nearby turned their heads. A clerk standing close by struggled to hide a laugh while Richard continued his little performance. "Young lady, we've seen plenty of scams here, but this is the first time I've seen someone dressed like you walking in with a check, big enough to buy a mansion." His voice carried across the lobby, loud enough for everyone waiting to hear. Maya's cheeks flushed, not from shame but from anger. Yet she remained calm, her eyes glinting with something closer to amusement than outrage. She gave a faint, ironic smile. "Is that so? Maybe you should check it carefully before making such quick judgments." Richard crossed his arms, smug as ever, and motioned for an employee to verify the check. In his mind, he was certain this was just another cheap scam. What he didn't know was that in just a few minutes, his entire career would come crashing down, all because of that arrogant smile. The bank clerk took the check from Richard, her eyes hesitating for a brief second. She glanced at Maya, then lowered her head to the machine for verification. Meanwhile, Richard seized the chance to show off his authority. He leaned against the counter, lowering his voice just enough for everyone nearby to hear. "You know, stunts like this could land someone in serious legal trouble. Forging a check is a crime. You could end up in jail, young lady." A chuckle rose from a corner of the waiting area. A middle-aged couple shook their heads as if they were watching some ridiculous play. Maya lifted her head, calmly meeting Richard's eyes, her lips curving slightly. "I agree, and I'm very curious to see who will actually end up in legal trouble today." The short reply was enough to silence a few giggles, and people started exchanging curious glances. The air in the lobby tightened, like a guitar string pulled to its breaking point. Then the young clerk looked up, her face suddenly pale. She stammered, "Mr. Richard, the check. It's completely valid. In fact, it's signed directly by the CEO of Sterling Holdings." The entire room went silent. Richard froze, his arrogant smile hardening like stone. He tried to keep his composure, but his hand trembled slightly. Maya sat up straight, her eyes glimmering with amusement. She didn't need to say another word. The truth had begun to reveal itself. Customers started whispering, some now staring at Richard with mocking eyes. Maya, however, simply sighed, as if she had long grown used to this kind of prejudice. Inside, her anger didn't explode like fire. Instead, it smoldered quietly, waiting for the right moment to blaze into a torch. Richard's face flushed red as he stammered out an excuse. There must be some mistake. Machines glitch all the time. But no one in the lobby bought his clumsy defense. Dozens of eyes bore into him, filled with scorn and ridicule. A young customer even let out a short laugh, making Richard's humiliation worse. Maya remained perfectly calm. She leaned an elbow on the counter, tilting her head slightly. "Then maybe you should call the CEO to confirm. Or, would you like me to do it for you?" The words cut like a blade straight into Richard's pride. His face darkened, sweat beading across his forehead. Still, he tried to maintain his facade of authority. I'll make the call." He picked up the phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed. The atmosphere inside the bank grew heavy, tense, almost suffocating. Customers whispered, some slyly pulling out their phones to record. Everyone could sense that something big was about to happen, and it wasn't going to end well for Richard. Maya sat back in her chair, crossing her legs, her eyes fixed on him with amused patience. She knew perfectly well that within minutes, his so-called power and status would come crashing down. And she also knew that when it happened, every person who had mocked her would be left in stunned silence. The phone rang a few times before someone answered. A firm, commanding voice came through the speaker, and the entire bank lobby seemed to hold its breath. "This is Jonathan Sterling. Who's calling?" Richard swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. "Sir, this is Richard, the branch manager. There's a young woman here, presenting a very large check. I just wanted to confirm." "What young woman?" The CEO's voice grew sharper. Richard glanced nervously at Maya. She says her name is Maya." A brief silence, then a confident laugh echoed through the line. "Maya? She's my daughter. And that check was signed by me." The lobby erupted in gasps. The murmurs turned into loud exclamations of shock. Some customers covered their mouths in disbelief. Maya lifted her chin, smiling with quiet confidence, her eyes saying, "I told you so." Richard was frozen, his face draining of color. He stammered, "Sir, I didn't know." But Jonathan Sterling cut him off coldly. "I don't care for excuses. As of this moment, you are no longer my bank manager. Pack your things. You're fired." The sharp click of the call ending felt like the final nail in Richard's career. A few customers broke into applause, others smirked with satisfaction. Maya simply rose, retrieved her check, and walked out, leaving behind a scene of chaos she didn't even bother to look back at. It was a moment no one in that bank would ever forget, the instant when fake power crumbled in just 5 minutes, and arrogance was punished on the spot. The news of Richard's firing spread like wildfire. Within an hour, the entire branch became the subject of gossip. Employees whispered, customers murmured, and even short videos of Richard's humiliation began circulating online. Everyone was stunned. A once arrogant manager, seemingly untouchable, had lost everything in just 5 minutes because of one smug smile. Maya stepped out of the bank, inhaling deeply. The sky seemed brighter now that she had left behind the humiliation others tried to pin on her. But the joy in her eyes wasn't only about Richard's downfall. It was also because she had stood her ground, proving that arrogance and prejudice always come with a price. Meanwhile, in the main office of Sterling Holdings, Jonathan Sterling leaned back in his chair, staring at an email report that had just popped up. It was an urgent report from the bank branch. He frowned at first, then suddenly chuckled. Looks like Maya just taught someone another lesson. Jonathan adored his daughter, but always allowed her the freedom to face challenges on her own. He knew Maya wasn't just the CEO's daughter. She was intelligent, resilient, and capable of making anyone who underestimated her regret it. And he was certain what happened today was only the beginning. By that afternoon, social media had exploded. The video of Richard mocking Maya and then getting exposed right on the spot had already hit hundreds of thousands of views. Comments poured in nonstop. Serves him right. That kind of arrogance always backfires. If I were Maya, I would have slapped him, but the way she handled it, calm and smart, was brilliant. I want to meet her. She's truly inspiring. While people online were hailing Maya as a quiet hero, the employees at the bank were uneasy. Some who had laughed at her earlier quickly deleted their mocking posts. Others looked genuinely regretful for not standing up for her when it mattered. Maya sat in a small cafe near the bank, quietly scrolling through the comments on her phone. She sipped her coffee, a faint smile tugging at her lips. People really do change fast, she thought. One moment they ridicule you, the next they praise you, all within hours. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her father's personal assistant. "Miss Maya, the boss would like you to come to the office. There are some matters to discuss," Maya smirked. She knew this conversation wouldn't just be about the check. It would be about something much bigger: responsibility, image, and her path forward within the company. As Maya stepped into the headquarters of Sterling Holdings, all eyes turned toward her. The receptionist, the security guards, even a few mid-level managers in mid-conversation all fell silent, their gazes filled with curiosity and newfound respect. Everyone had heard the story from that morning. Now they no longer saw her as just an ordinary girl, but as the living proof of arrogance shattered in just 5 minutes. Maya walked calmly, her faint smile unshaken by the stares around her. The CEO's office door opened, and Jonathan Sterling, her father, stood by the window, gazing out at the city. When Maya entered, he turned, his eyes warm, but his tone firm. "You've stirred up a storm, Maya." Maya raised an eyebrow, taking a seat across from him. "I only deposited a check." "That storm. Others created it, don't you think?" Jonathan chuckled lowly. "That's my daughter speaking. But you know, from now on, every move you make will be scrutinized. People won't just see you as Maya, a young woman, but Maya, the CEO's daughter. And sometimes that's a heavy burden." Maya stayed silent for a few seconds, her eyes softening. She knew he was right. Richard's firing was justice, but it had also thrown her into the spotlight. The praise she received today could easily become a double-edged sword tomorrow. "I'm not afraid, Father," Maya said slowly. "If prejudice is a mountain, then I'll climb it. And when I reach the top, I'll show them. They were wrong." Jonathan studied his daughter for a long moment before nodding, a proud smile tugging at his lips. "Then get ready, Maya. This is only the beginning." The next day, outside Sterling Holdings headquarters, dozens of reporters were waiting. Cameras, microphones, and a storm of questions filled the air. From the check incident to Richard's 5-minute downfall, everything had become headline news. As Maya stepped out of her car, camera flashes exploded. A reporter rushed forward. "Miss Maya, how did you feel when the bank manager mocked you?" Another quickly chimed in. "And do you think Richard being fired in just 5 minutes was too harsh?" Maya paused for a moment. The crowd's eyes, curious, judgmental, admiring, all weighed heavily on her. She took a deep breath, then smiled softly. "I think this wasn't just about a check. It's a reminder that you should never judge someone by appearances. If I hadn't been the CEO's daughter yesterday, maybe I would have been crushed under those insults." And that's the real problem. The crowd erupted. Some journalists nodded, impressed. Her answer wasn't smug, but sharp, turning the incident into a powerful message. From a distance, Jonathan watched his daughter, pride shining in his eyes. He knew Maya had chosen her own path, not merely living in the shadow of being the CEO's daughter, but using her own voice to change perspectives. And as Maya turned away, walking confidently into the building, the chaos of reporters buzzed behind her. But inside her, one truth was clear. This was only the opening chapter of a much longer, more challenging journey. While Maya was making headlines in the media, on the other side of the city, Richard sat slumped over a glass of whiskey in a dingy bar. Once a polished bank manager, he now looked pitiful, tie wrinkled, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights and alcohol. An old friend sitting beside him patted his shoulder. "Come on, Richard. What's done is done. You lost the job, you'll find another." Richard's head snapped up, his eyes blazing. "Another job? Do you have any idea? I spent my whole life building my reputation, and it all collapsed because of some girl with a check." And the way she looked at me, that smug smile, I won't let it go. Inside him, anger mixed with humiliation until it consumed him. He remembered every laugh from the customers, every scornful glance when the CEO fired him over the phone. Redemption or moving on never crossed his mind. Instead, Richard began fueling a plan for revenge. "If she thinks she can humiliate me in front of everyone, then I'll make sure the whole world sees her weakness," Richard muttered. Gripping the glass so tightly his hand shook. Elsewhere, Maya had no idea another storm was quietly brewing. To her, the bank incident was just a small lesson. But to Richard, it was the start of a shadow war he was willing to risk everything to win. The next day, the media was flooded with news about Maya. Most articles praised her as a new symbol against prejudice and discrimination. But in the midst of all the positive coverage, strange headlines began to surface. Is the CEO's daughter really worth admiring? Maya, victim or just riding on her father's power? These articles offered no solid evidence, just speculation and innuendo, suggesting Maya had used her father's influence to get Richard fired. And behind it all was Richard himself. He had secretly reached out to a few tabloid writers, paying them to smear Maya and sow doubt among the public. In a small conference room at Sterling Holdings, Maya stared at the projected screen showing the articles. Some younger managers whispered nervously, "This could damage the company's image. If public opinion splits, we might be in trouble." Maya stayed silent, gripping her glass of water tightly. She wasn't surprised. Her instincts told her Richard wouldn't back down. Still, reading those venomous words stirred both anger and amusement inside her. "They think I'll be scared of a few tabloid articles?" Maya said quietly, her voice steady. "I'll show them that truth is stronger than lies." She rose from her chair, eyes blazing with determination. The storm might be coming, but Maya had no intention of hiding. Instead, she was ready to walk straight into it, to prove she wasn't just the CEO's daughter, but a true fighter in her own right. That evening, Maya decided not to remain silent. She opened her personal social media account, usually filled with simple everyday photos, and typed a long post. "I will not apologize for standing up for myself. I will not apologize for being someone's daughter. The only thing I regret is that we live in a world where people still mock others for how they look. I didn't humiliate anyone. I only asked to be treated with the same respect as any customer. If that cost someone their job, then ask yourself, was it my fault or was it their arrogance?" The post went viral almost instantly. Thousands of supportive comments poured in, with many calling Maya the voice of justice. Still, skeptics left bitter remarks like, "She's only brave because her dad backs her up." As Maya turned off her phone, a new message popped up. Anonymous. "You think you've won? This is only the beginning." She instantly knew who it was. Richard. The short message landed like a stone, a clear warning that he was ready for open war. Across town, Richard slammed his phone onto the table, smirking with satisfaction. He believed he had planted the seed of fear. What he didn't know was that Maya wasn't someone who trembled easily. On the contrary, his threat only fueled the fire within her, pushing her to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. A week later, Maya unexpectedly received an invitation to attend a major financial conference in the city. The theme was trust and transparency in the banking system. A little too coincidental. Surprised, Maya still chose to attend, knowing it might be the perfect chance to speak her truth publicly. As she entered the lavish hall under the dazzling lights, hundreds of finance and banking professionals filled the seats. But what froze Maya in her tracks was the sight of Richard standing on stage as a guest speaker. He wore a brand new suit, exuding confidence as if he'd never been humiliated and fired. During his speech, Richard cleverly polished his image, slipping in a sharp jab. "It's unfortunate that nowadays some people use their family's name to destroy another person's career. But I believe true justice always shines through." Gasps rippled through the room, and several heads turned toward Maya. Clearly, everyone understood who Richard was targeting. Maya inhaled deeply, heat rushing through her chest. She had no intention of staying silent anymore. When the open discussion session began, Maya stood up. Every eye locked on her. Her voice rang out, clear and steady with power. "Mr. Richard, if justice truly shines through, perhaps you should tell everyone what you did that morning. Wasn't it you who mocked a customer because of her appearance and clothes? And did you forget that sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom, but from the truth that can't be hidden?" The hall fell silent. Richard's face drained of color, his words stuck in his throat. It was a public confrontation, direct and undeniable. Maya had stepped into the spotlight, ready to fight. The entire hall held its breath. Cameras swiveled instantly toward Maya, and reporters scrambled to jot down every word. The tension was so thick, it felt like even a heartbeat could be heard echoing in the silence. Richard tried to steady himself. He forced a weak smile, his voice hoarse but pretending to sound confident. "Miss Maya, I never mocked anyone. It was all a misunderstanding, blown out of proportion by social media. Anyone can be misinterpreted." Maya raised an eyebrow but didn't reply immediately. She stepped closer to the stage, the spotlight highlighting her presence among the hundreds of watching eyes. She pulled out her phone and played a video, the very clip a customer had recorded at the bank that morning. Richard's voice blared unmistakably. "This is the first time I've seen someone dressed like this walk in with a check big enough to buy a mansion." The sound cut through the hall like ice. A wave of murmurs swept the crowd, with several people shaking their heads in disapproval. Richard's face turned pale, his lips trembling, unable to deny it. Maya smiled faintly, her voice calm but razor-sharp. "That's the justice you just spoke of. Mr. Richard, the truth doesn't need embellishment. It only needs to be revealed." Thunderous applause erupted, drowning out the tense silence. Some reporters rushed out the door, eager to break the news. Richard stood frozen, like a crumbling statue in front of everyone. Maya drew a deep breath. She knew that from this moment, the battle was no longer just between her and Richard. It had become a public war, truth versus lies, trust versus manipulation. And whether she liked it or not, she had become the face of it. Right after the conference ended, social media erupted once more. The video of Maya exposing Richard on stage spread like wildfire, climbing to the top of trending lists within hours. Headlines across online news outlets screamed, "The moment Richard collapsed before the CEO's daughter." Maya, a new voice of justice in the financial world. The manager who mocked a customer faces public humiliation. The story was everywhere, on newspapers, TV, even in casual conversations at street cafes. Some praised Maya for her courage, while others raised doubts. Is she just using the media to build her image? Meanwhile, Richard had all but vanished from public view. He stopped giving interviews, disappeared from the press. Yet in the shadows, he had not given up. The deeper his humiliation, the stronger his hatred grew. As for Maya, after the conference, invitations flooded in. Organizations wanted her as a speaker. Universities asked her to share her inspiring story. Her phone rang nonstop. Jonathan watched his daughter's rising popularity with both pride and concern. He knew this fame brought opportunities, but also made Maya a bigger target. That night, Maya sat alone by her window, gazing at the glittering city below. A thought crossed her mind. This is only the beginning. If I've chosen to step into the light, then I must be ready to face the shadows that come with it. While Maya's face shone brightly across the media, Richard hid in the shadows, quietly nurturing his next plan. He knew he couldn't confront her directly anymore. All the evidence was against him. But Richard understood one thing. You don't need to defeat someone with the truth. You only need to plant enough doubt. One evening, in a dimly lit room, Richard sat before his computer, making a call to an old contact in the media world. His voice was low, gravelly, full of calculation. "I want to release a story. No proof needed, just impact. All I need is for people to believe Maya isn't who they think she is." There was a pause. Then laughter on the other end. "If you pay well, I'll turn her into a privileged opportunist in the public's eyes." Richard nodded, his eyes glinting with madness. In his mind, the scheme took shape, fabricating stories about Maya's personal life, even smearing her relationship with her father, Jonathan, transforming her from a hero of justice into someone exploiting her family's power. Meanwhile, Maya was busy preparing for her first keynote speech at a prestigious university. She had no idea that in the shadows, a cruel game was already being set in motion, and this time, Richard wouldn't just target her, but her family as well. On the morning of her keynote speech, Maya woke up excited. The prestigious university had invited her to share her story, and both students and professors were eagerly awaiting her arrival. But as soon as she opened her phone, dozens of messages from friends and colleagues flooded in. "Maya, have you read the news today? They're saying terrible things about you. Don't pay attention. We believe in you." Her heart tightened. Quickly scrolling through news sites, she froze as her face appeared under slanderous headlines. CEO's daughter accused of using power to ruin others. Insiders claim Maya advanced by writing on her father's name. Maya is no victim. She's a media manipulator. The articles dripped with malice, filled with sharp words and anonymous sources that cast doubt on her character. Maya bit her lip, her hands trembling. She instantly recognized Richard's hand in this. Unable to defeat her with truth, he had chosen to stain her reputation instead. Just then, her phone buzzed again. This time, a message from her father, Jonathan. "Maya, don't let rumors shake you. The whole auditorium is waiting. Step out there and let the truth defend you." Maya closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Her father's words felt like medicine. She knew if she backed down today, Richard would win. But if she stood strong, with honesty and courage, the public would see for themselves what was real and what was false. She stood before the mirror, adjusted her hair, and smiled with quiet pride. No matter how fierce the storm outside, she was ready to face it. The university auditorium was packed. Students filled every seat. Professors were in attendance, and reporters hovered with cameras, ready to capture the most sellable moment. The atmosphere buzzed with curiosity and doubt. Some eyes shone with admiration, but many carried suspicion after the morning's wave of rumors. When Maya stepped onto the stage, whispers rippled through the crowd. She could feel the undercurrent of public opinion waiting to swallow her whole. But instead of fear, she stood tall, her gaze sweeping across the hall. She began. "I know many of you have read the articles about me this morning. And maybe some of you are wondering, does she really deserve this?" The auditorium went silent. Maya smiled faintly, but her voice rang firm and clear. "I won't waste time denying every rumor. Instead, I want to share the truth. A truth you can see for yourselves. I didn't choose to be the CEO's daughter, but I did choose how to face prejudice. I chose to stand tall when mocked, and I chose not to stay silent when someone believed their power gave them the right to humiliate others." A few claps broke the silence, then spread wider until the hall echoed with applause. One student stood and shouted, "She's right!" The atmosphere shifted palpably. Maya felt warmth swell in her chest. For the first time, she wasn't just the victim, or the CEO's daughter. She was someone shaping her own story. As the applause thundered across the auditorium, Maya felt a new energy rising, genuine support. No longer because she was the CEO's daughter, but because she had spoken to something universal, the pain of being judged by appearances. But then, an unexpected disruption. A reporter in the back row suddenly jumped to his feet. Microphone raised, voice sharp. "Maya, that's a great speech. But do you deny that it was your father, CEO Jonathan Sterling, who called to have Richard fired in just 5 minutes? Do you admit that without your father, you'd be nothing?" The hall buzzed with tension. Whispers rippled, and eyes turned on Maya, waiting for her reaction. That reporter was none other than one of the hired pens Richard had sent to throw fuel on the fire. Maya drew a long breath. Instead of retreating, she stepped closer to the podium, her gaze steady as she addressed the crowd. "Yes, my father is the CEO. Yes, he fired Richard. But the real question is, why did he have to do it? Because Richard was wrong. He mocked a customer based on her clothes and appearance. If it had been anyone else in my place, Richard would have been dealt with the same way. Power doesn't hide the truth." The hall erupted again, applause louder than before. Many students stood up, cheering her words. Maya's answer didn't just defend her, it cut straight to the heart of the matter. At the back of the room, Richard, hidden in the shadows, watching, ground his teeth. He hadn't expected Maya to turn the situation around so quickly. In his eyes now, she wasn't just a small opponent, but a real threat. After the keynote, Maya left the auditorium surrounded by students and reporters. Questions flew at her from every direction, camera flashes exploding nonstop. She smiled, shaking hands with eager students, though inside her heart still raced from the tension she had just endured. As Maya stepped into the waiting room, her father's assistant stood ready, phone in hand, eyes wide with excitement. "Maya!" CNN and BBC just sent invitations. "They want you for a live interview. And not only that, a leading European financial magazine wants to put you on the cover of their special issue on young voices of inspiration." Maya froze. She had never imagined her ordeal would echo this far. From one humiliating morning at the bank, she was now being seen as a voice in a global conversation about prejudice and justice. But if I accept, Richard will double down. "He'll smear me even harder," Maya whispered, worry flickering in her eyes. The assistant smiled knowingly. "True, but that's exactly why you need to speak. When the truth is heard on an international stage, the lies burn out on their own." Maya stayed quiet for a long moment. Then she gripped the phone tighter, her eyes sparking with resolve. "All right, I'll do it. If this is a chance to turn humiliation into strength for others, I won't waste it." Outside the glass window, the city glowed with lights. Maya knew that from this moment, she no longer stood just for herself, but for millions who had been looked down upon. And she was ready. In a cheap rented room, Richard sat glued to his laptop screen. News about Maya flooded every outlet: CNN, BBC, European magazines, all praising her as a symbol against prejudice. Every headline cut into him like a knife. Slamming his fist on the table, Richard growled, "Impossible! That girl should have been buried in humiliation, not celebrated as a hero." Across from him sat a shadowy man, calm and composed, dragging on a cigarette. "I told you, Richard, attacking her through the media won't work. The more you smear her, the more sympathy she gains. If you want to destroy Maya, you have to strike where she least expects: her family." Richard's eyes narrowed, lips trembling, but a dangerous glint sparked within. He knew Jonathan Sterling, the most powerful man he had ever faced, was Maya's pride and strongest shield. If that relationship was shaken, Maya's image could crumble. "You mean accuse Jonathan of financial fraud? Or claim he used his power to cover scandals?" Richard asked, his voice dropping low. The man gave a cold smile. "Exactly. Plant the seed of doubt, and the public will do the rest." Richard leaned back in his chair, heart pounding with a mix of fear and twisted excitement. He knew this move was dangerous, that it could backfire, but to him, there was no turning back now. Meanwhile, Maya had no idea the next storm would strike not just at her, but at the father she admired most. And when it came, it would be fiercer than anything she had ever faced. The next morning, the city's biggest financial newspaper blasted a headline across its front page: "CEO Jonathan Sterling suspected of large-scale financial fraud?" The article sprawled on, citing anonymous insiders, accusing Jonathan of using his influence to cover shady investments and granting special privileges to his daughter. Within hours, the story spread across every channel: TV, online outlets, and social media. At Sterling Holdings headquarters, the atmosphere turned suffocating. Shareholders called non-stop, employees whispered nervously, and some key clients even demanded to pause cooperation until matters were clarified. Maya sat in the boardroom with her father. Jonathan appeared calm, but his eyes carried weariness. He said quietly, "I know this is Richard's doing, but public opinion is a double-edged sword. If we don't clear this quickly, the company will suffer heavy damage." Maya clenched her fists. She knew this time it wasn't just her battle. It was a direct strike at her family, at her father's legacy. And worse, the public loved scandals far more than truth. "Father, let me speak up," Maya said firmly. "I've faced Richard once, and I won't let him win a second time." Jonathan studied his daughter, silent for a few moments, then nodded. In that moment, Maya realized, this time she wasn't only defending her own honor, she was carrying the honor of the entire Sterling family. 3 days later, a large-scale press conference was held at Sterling Holdings headquarters. Hundreds of reporters crowded in, microphones pointed at the stage, cameras flashing non-stop. Outside the building, dozens of protesters waved banners, "We want the truth!" Maya stepped onto the stage in an elegant blue dress, her face calm but her eyes burning with determination. Jonathan sat quietly behind her, letting his daughter take the lead. Maya began, her voice ringing clear. Over the past few days, my name and my father's have been dragged across headlines, tied to heavy accusations. I am not here today to weep or beg for sympathy. I am here to speak the truth. She raised a thick folder, her hand steady. These are all audited financial records of Sterling Holdings from the past 5 years. I've submitted them to 3 independent international auditing agencies. If there is any trace of fraud, I am ready to step down and face the law alongside my father. The hall gasped. A reporter shouted, "But sources claim you've been playing the victim by leaning on your father's power. How do you respond?" Maya gave a small smile and replied firmly, "If this is an act, then let me ask, who here would willingly play the role of being mocked in public, then forced to stand before the world to defend their own honor? I didn't choose this role, but I did choose not to bow my head." Applause erupted, stronger than ever before. Some reporters nodded, scribbling furiously. In that moment, Maya turned the press conference from an interrogation into a declaration. She and her family had nothing to fear from the truth. In a dark corner of the city, Richard watched the live broadcast on his screen, his face twisted with rage. He hadn't expected Maya to turn public opinion so swiftly, and for the first time, Richard felt a creeping fear. Maybe this time, he was the one being cornered. That night, in a dark, dingy room, Richard sat motionless before his computer screen, his gaunt face looking like a man who had lost everything. News outlets flooded with praise for Maya after her press conference. The public was leaning strongly toward her, hailing her as a symbol of transparency. Richard dragged deeply on a cigarette, his bloodshot eyes wild from sleeplessness. A dangerous thought throbbed in his mind. If I can't bring her down through public opinion, then I'll drag her down with me. He opened an old, forgotten file. Documents about a high-risk investment project Sterling Holdings had been involved in years ago. The project was perfectly legal, but Richard knew that with careful editing, it could look like explosive evidence of corruption. If I go down, the Sterlings go down with me, Richard muttered, a twisted smile spreading. He quickly doctored the documents and sent them to several tabloid outlets, attaching a fabricated audio recording generated with technology. In the recording, Jonathan Sterling's voice could be heard saying, "We must hide this money at all costs." This was Richard's final move, a strike that could destroy both sides. If the public believed the tape, Sterling Holdings' credibility would collapse, and Maya would be dragged into the abyss alongside her father. Across the city, Maya sat at her desk, jotting notes for her upcoming international interview. She had no idea that a media bomb had already been planted, one that could detonate at any moment, tearing apart everything she had just fought to protect. The next morning, the financial world was rocked. Major newspapers splashed headlines about leaked documents and a shocking audio recording. Jonathan Sterling admits to hiding illegal investments. News channels cut into breaking reports. Analysts debated fiercely and on social media. The hashtag Dr. Sterling scandal shot to the global #1 spot. Within hours, Sterling Holdings' stock price plunged. Shareholders panicked, phones rang nonstop. Several international partners announced they were suspending cooperation pending investigation. In an emergency boardroom meeting, Jonathan sat in silence, his face hard as stone. He knew the tape was fake, but its impact was devastating, far worse than any rumor before. Across the table, Maya's hands trembled as live news headlines flashed on the big screen. "Father, if they believe this recording, then everything." Maya's voice faltered. Jonathan placed a firm hand on her shoulder, his tone steady. "Maya, this is the moment we cannot flinch. They want to brand us as criminals, but we hold the truth." Maya swallowed hard, then nodded, her eyes blazing with determination. "Then I'll do what Richard could never expect. I'll turn his game upside down." She rose to her feet, addressing the company's media team. "Prepare a live global broadcast. No hiding, no evasion. Tonight, we face the world head-on." The room buzzed with tense energy. This wasn't just a crisis. It was a fight for survival, a battle that would decide whether the Sterling family stood tall or crumbled completely. That evening, millions of people across the world tuned in. Sterling Holdings had organized a global live broadcast, and Maya Sterling dominated the headlines. Major networks, CNN, BBC, CNBC, all aired it simultaneously. Maya stepped onto the stage, the spotlights glaring on her calm face, her eyes sharp with resolve. Beside her, Jonathan sat silently in the background. A steady wall of support, Maya began, her voice clear and commanding. Tonight, I am not just speaking to you as the daughter of the CEO of Sterling Holdings, but as a citizen falsely accused. Over the past days, so-called leaked documents and a fabricated audio recording have spread. Let me be clear. They are lies. She gestured, and the large screen behind her lit up, displaying forensic analysis reports from 3 international cybersecurity firms. The reports highlighted how the audio was digitally altered with deepfake technology, pointing out undeniable inconsistencies. Here is the evidence. And I want you to see the truth with your own eyes, not just hear it from me. The hall erupted in gasps, followed quickly by thunderous applause. Maya pressed on. Someone wants to destroy me and my family by sowing doubt. But lies cannot hold forever. We must ask, who stands to gain from spreading these falsehoods? Cameras swept the room, capturing shocked and outraged faces. Maya stood tall, her gaze searing through every lens. I will not allow that person to remain hidden in the shadows any longer, and I promise you, we will find him. Right after the live broadcast, Maya assembled a team of the world's top cybersecurity experts. In a closed conference room, giant screens displayed streams of code, charts, and digital footprints. The air was taut, every second loaded with immense pressure. An older expert with silver hair spoke in a steady voice. We've analyzed the raw data of the fake recording. From the IP trail and transmission path, we've traced its original source. And the results show it didn't come from any news outlet, but from a private server. Maya frowned. Whose server? The expert tapped a few keys, and a name flashed across the screen, silencing the room. Richard Holloway. Gasps filled the room. Maya sat still for a moment, then gripped the armrest tightly, her eyes turning cold. I knew it. He's gone too far, a younger expert interjected, but we'll need irrefutable evidence to present this to the public. If we only show the technical trail, Richard can claim he was framed. Maya nodded firmly. Then find everything, emails, money transfers, any link at all. When we expose him, I want the entire world to see proof so undeniable that he can't hide behind lies ever again. The room crackled with determination. This time, Maya wasn't just defending. She was on the offensive, and her mission was clear. Drag Richard out of the shadows and let the light of justice burn away every lie he had built. 3 days later, in a room cluttered with screens and papers, Maya's cyber team erupted when they uncovered the final piece of the puzzle. Here it is, a young expert shouted, pointing at the data trail on the screen. We've traced a series of wire transfers from an account under a shell company, and the true owner is Richard Holloway. On the monitor, the cold numbers told the story. Tens of thousands of dollars wired to a group of tabloid reporters, labeled as media expenses. Maya stared at the evidence, her heart pounding. This was no longer suspicion. It was undeniable proof. Another expert added, we also found emails between Richard and several reporters. In them, he directly instructed them to publish smear pieces in exchange for hefty payments. Maya closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The anger she had carried for days had transformed into power. She opened her eyes, blazing with fire. It's time to reveal this. Not just to shareholders, not just to clients, but to the entire world. Jonathan entered, having overheard the exchange. He placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, smiling softly. You've gone further than I ever imagined, Maya. This time, let me stay in the background. The spotlight belongs to you, Maya nodded. She knew the next battle would be Richard's undoing, and her greatest test yet. She was no longer the girl mocked in a bank. She was someone ready to write her own history. That evening, an international press conference drew the attention of millions. The world waited for the answer. Was Sterling Holdings truly involved in scandal, or was it all a fabrication? Maya walked onto the stage, her face resolute, camera flashes exploding across the room. She took a deep breath and began. Not long ago, my family and Sterling Holdings were smeared by a malicious media campaign. A fake recording, fabricated leaks. And now, I will show you the truth. She gestured, and the large screen behind her lit up with evidence. Financial transfers from Richard Halloway's account to multiple tabloid reporters. Emails with explicit instructions to smear Maya and Jonathan Sterling. And forensic reports from 3 independent cybersecurity firms confirming the technical trail. Gasps rippled through the hall. Reporters scrambled, snapping photos and scribbling notes. Maya continued, her voice ringing strong. These are not rumors. These are facts. Richard Halloway deliberately orchestrated a smear campaign, not only to destroy my personal reputation, but to shake public trust in this company. A reporter called out, Maya, do you have a message for Richard? Maya lifted her chin, her eyes blazing. Just one. You can build 1,000 lies, but a single truth is enough to burn them all down. And tonight, the truth has exposed you to the world. Applause thundered like a storm. Maya allowed herself a faint smile, knowing that this public battle was over. And for the first time, Richard had nowhere left to hide. News of Maya's evidence against Richard spread like lightning. Overnight, every major outlet reported, Richard Halloway, mastermind behind smear campaign against Sterling Holdings, exposed. The next morning, police knocked on the door of Richard's shabby rented apartment. Startled, he frantically shoved papers into an old suitcase, his hands trembling with sweat. On the TV in the corner, his own face flashed on the morning news, bold letters across the screen. Wanted for fabricating evidence and bribing the media. Richard muttered to himself, almost delirious, No, this can't be happening. It was just a game. He bolted for the back door, hoping to escape through the alley. But the moment he stepped out, blinding light from police cruisers caught him. Sirens wailed. Officers in bulletproof vests aimed their flashlights at him. Richard Halloway. You are under arrest for fabricating evidence, bribery, and deliberate defamation. You have the right to remain silent. Richard collapsed, his suitcase falling open, fake documents scattering in the wind. His face twisted in panic and bitterness. He knew the game was over, and this time he was the absolute loser. Meanwhile, at Sterling Holdings headquarters, Maya stood by the window, looking down at the bustling city. Her phone buzzed non-stop with calls from international media. She didn't laugh in triumph nor gloat. Instead, her eyes shone with relief and a new resolve to protect the truth not just for herself, but for all those who had never had a voice. A week after Richard's arrest, Maya sat in the sleek CNN studio in New York. Studio lights blazed, and the world watched. The host smiled and began, Ladies and gentlemen, today we welcome a very special guest, Maya Sterling, the young woman who has become a global symbol of transparency and justice. Maya sat tall, calm, her eyes still carrying quiet determination. The first question came, Maya, how do you feel now that the truth has come out and Richard has been arrested? She exhaled softly before answering, I don't feel triumph, and I don't rejoice at seeing him in handcuffs. What I feel is relief, because this proves that truth, no matter how distorted, always finds its way to speak. The studio fell silent for a moment. Then the host asked, Many now see you as a new role model. Do you think you're ready to take on greater responsibility, not just for the company, but for society? Maya smiled, her eyes brighter than ever. I never set out to be a symbol. I was just a girl once mocked at a bank. But if my story can help someone stand up and refuse to stay silent in the face of injustice, then I am ready. And I believe that is the true power we all share. Applause filled the studio. On screens across the globe, millions watched not just the CEO's daughter, but a courageous young woman determined to use her voice to change perceptions. As the studio lights dimmed, Maya stepped outside, taking a deep breath. She felt as if a great weight had finally lifted. Yet the most meaningful moment wasn't on live TV before millions. It came when the office door at Sterling Holdings opened and Jonathan was there waiting. He didn't say a word at first. He simply opened his arms. Maya rushed forward, hugging her father tightly, just as she had as a little girl. In that embrace, the weeks of tension and pressure seemed to melt away. Jonathan whispered, "You've done what even I never thought I had the courage to do. You didn't just defend our family's honor. You inspired millions." Maya looked up at him, her eyes glistening. "Dad, I only did what I believed was right. Without your trust in me, I would never have dared to go this far." Jonathan smiled softly, patting her shoulder. "I don't feel like I'm leading anymore. Now it's you who's blazing the trail." They sat together by the window, gazing out at the city lights. For the first time, Maya felt she was no longer just the CEO's daughter. She had grown, stood on her own, and her story had become a source of strength for others. In that warm silence, Maya knew a new chapter of her life was beginning, and this time she would walk it not in anyone's shadow, but as a woman who dared to face, dared to fight, and dared to lead. A month later, Maya appeared on the cover of Time magazine, the headline blazing, "Maya Sterling, a new voice for justice and trust." Her face radiated confidence, no longer carrying the tension of that humiliating morning at the bank, but the strength of someone who had conquered her greatest trial. At a massive square in New York, Maya stood before thousands gathered for a community event. They weren't there to hear the CEO's daughter, but to listen to Maya, the young woman who had dared to stand against prejudice, face the shadows, and bring truth into the light. Her voice rang out, carrying across the vast space, "I wasn't born to be a hero. I have been afraid, I have felt powerless. But I've learned one thing: silence only feeds lies. If I could stand up, then so can any one of you." The crowd erupted into thunderous applause, many with tears in their eyes. A young woman pushed forward, shouting, "Maya, you gave us the faith that no one has the right to define our worth but ourselves." Maya smiled, raising her hand in greeting, her eyes shining. She knew her journey wasn't over. But from that day forward, she was no longer just a survivor or a daughter of power. She had become a symbol of courage. And somewhere deep inside, Maya whispered to herself, "This story began in a small bank, but it ended by reshaping the worldview of millions."